Across the world, people have their housing costs taken away as much as half of their income. Have you ever thought of trying to change that? The good news is there is a way. House hacking is real, and we are here to show you how other people just like you have made it happen. Welcome to the House Hacking Podcast. And here is your host, house hacking expert, Andrew Kerr.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in this week. We've got a great show coming up. But before we get to it, I just want to ask a favor for you. If you could take a minute and leave a review of the show, we'd really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button. That way you always get notified of the latest episode. Now, today on the show, we've got John and Tahseen coming on from Millennial Fire. They've got this really interesting house hacking story where they actually started off with a room rental house hack and moved into a small multifamily house hack. And what I really love about this episode is you get to see them transition to two different styles of house hacks as their life changes. And that's the wonderful thing about house hacking is it doesn't have to be this one size fits all, or as you start to do a house hack, as your life changes, you can continue to a different style of house hack to continue to have your housing costs eliminated. So with that, let's go ahead and bring them on. John, Tahseen, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm excited about your story. So how are you guys doing? Where are you calling in from?
We're doing well, and we're calling in from Ocoee, Florida.
Oh, wonderful. Now, I know a little bit about your house hacking sort of experience over the past couple of years, but let's just start off. Can you give everyone that's listening this sort of high-level summary of what your house hacking experience has been like?
Of course. So house hacking is actually something we just kind of fell into. We bought our first single-family home back in 2016, and in 2017, my best friend was in college and had a rough housing situation. So we're just like, hey, you can come stay with us, help us cover a few utilities, and help us out here, and we can help you out. And with that, he stayed, and once he graduated, he asked if he could stay longer, and we were like, sure, but we got to pay more rent now that you can work. And so he decided that he would stay longer, and that relationship worked out. And so he stayed, and a few months later, one of his friends also wanted to move in. And so his other friend also moved in, and this was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. So we were living in the master bedroom, and these two friends were living in the other 2 bedrooms. And around this time is when we discovered Bigger Pockets and also discovered what the term house hacking actually is. And so looked into buying a duplex. And so a few months after that, decided to buy a duplex, live on one side with the FHA loan and rent out the other side, and then move someone else into the master bedroom of the original house.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And yeah. And so, and then that's pretty much the biggest part of our house hacking journey. Now we've moved out of the duplex to move in with our in-laws so we can rent out the other side of the duplex so we could buy our next duplex, hopefully within the next few months.
Oh, awesome. All right. So let's really dig in. I feel like as you were talking, I wrote down about a dozen different questions. I really just want to dig into this. So, 2016, you bought a single family house. Obviously, you two were together. Have you gotten married yet? Was this sort of like your first home together, or were you just dating still at the time? What was sort of life like?
Yeah, so we got married in May of 2014. So that was our first purchase together, was our single family home in October of 2016. And John had the idea from the time before we got married that he wanted to retire by the age of 40. And we didn't exactly know how to do it, but we knew owning a house had to be somewhere in that mix. So that's why we bought a house as soon as we could.
So is this like, you're starting to get serious dating? He's like, just so you know, babe, I'm going to retire at 40. I hope you're on board with this or not. Or like, how did this come up in conversation?
I really don't. Was it when we were dating? No, I think it was after we got married that he said that. No, because before we got married, I was actually the financial expert. And I was the one that brought him on to, making sure his credit was right, making sure we were in line to buy a house when we were ready. And once he learned how to be financially responsible, he took it and he ran with it. And it wasn't just about having good credit and making sure we're homeowners. It was about, no, let's retire early. So he kind of got the information from me and then ran with it.
Oh, so He learned and then took it up a step above that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, what it was is that it kind of hit me when I finally had to work my first real job. I'm a musician as well. And so through high school, through college, that's the way I was able to sustain myself, pay rent by playing piano at different churches and at different jazz bars and things like that. And once I graduated and, of course, got married, I got into the real workforce in software development, which I love. But I was like, I don't think I want to do this until I'm 65. Yeah. Let's try to see if there's a way to, speed these timelines up a little bit. So that's what happened there.
Awesome. So do you just play piano or you play any other instruments?
I dabble in quite a few instruments. Piano is my main instrument. I play drums, bass guitar, saxophone is one of my favorite instruments to play.
You played the saxophone to me at my wedding. That was a surprise at our wedding.
So yeah, I played trumpet and then I tried to learn alto sax and it was just miserable. It was not good at all.
Yeah, going from the brass to the woodwind.
Yep,
yeah,
it's a tough one. Awesome. All right, so you sprung it on her, you want to retire at 40. What was your reaction to this? Were you automatically like, oh yeah, he's finally on board and he has it? Or is this like, you're maybe dreaming a little bit?
So for me, I was like, it sounds really great and I would love to do it, but I'm not really sure how to. But if you figure out the way, I'll follow. Like that was where I was.
Oh, awesome. All right, so you have the house. How'd you end up buying the house? Did you buy cash? Did you get a loan? What type of loan did you do?
And so with that, we did the conventional loan, 10% down, and we had my in-laws, her parents, to help us out with the down payment with that. And they gave us a loan of $6,000 that we gave back to them after, I think it was a year, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that was the way we were able to get into our first single family home.
Oh, wonderful. All right. So you bought the home. Was this house in Florida as well?
Yes. And it was in a city called Apopka. All these cities that we're referring to are in the greater Orlando area, like on the outskirts of Orlando.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
The house was in Apopka.
Okay. So you put the 10% down, and how big the house you said was like the 3-bedroom home?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember roughly what the mortgage payment was running on that for you?
Yes. So the mortgage payment, the principal and interest was $1,000, and we had an escrow account as well. So that was $344. So all expenses included was $1,344.
Okay. So really, that's not that bad of a payment for, starting off a couple where both individuals are working. This is basically what most every American does, right? That can buy a house.
Right.
Correct.
So now you had your old buddy be like, hey, this housing situation's not good. Can I move in? I mean, as a newlywed couple in your first house, I mean, how'd this relationship actually go? Where it's like, hey, we're having a friend moving in? Or was this like, hey, we can get someone to pay some rent? I mean, just tell me a little bit about how that dialogue went.
Actually, we were kind of excited to have the friend moving in because the other 2 bedrooms of the house were barely even being used. We realized that we bought a lot more house than we actually needed to live happily. We pretty much utilized the master bedroom, the kitchen area, and that was it. The house also had an office that was just there for storage pretty much. And we realized, especially after reading a book called The Millionaire Next Door, that we definitely bought more house than we actually needed. And so we were actually happy to have someone in the house and using the house that we were paying for, because those rooms were just sitting there void. I
love the book, The Millionaire Next Door. I just want to call that out real quick. If anyone that's listening hasn't read that, go pick it up. It's such a cool book. And his daughter actually just did an update in the past, I think, year or 2 years to the book. So definitely check it out. I'll put it in the show notes. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's perfectly, that I love the book as well. So I definitely is a must read for everyone. But like he was saying, it was his best friend. And so he was someone that I knew very well as well. Mm-hmm. So I remember the day that he was complaining to John on the phone, and I just told him, I was like, let him move in with us. Like, we have a whole half a house that's not being used. Like, that's fine, And so, and then after he moved in is when we really realized, like, this is really something we could do. Like, we don't even barely know that he's there sometimes because we're on our side, he's on his side, and it works out perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just think it's so funny. Like, I did the same thing, and I think almost everyone does that same thing. It's like, well, here's the house we can qualify for. Of course, we need, multiple bedroom home, and then we sort of get in there, and then some people go one way. It's like, well, then I got to furnish every single room, and then here's all this money we spend to have furniture in a room that never gets used and collects dust, or it just sits empty and collects dust. So now you got him in. How much did you actually charge him for rent?
So when he first moved in, we knew that he just had I think he had maybe a part-time job that wasn't paying that much, and he was just trying to focus on finishing school. So we only charged him enough to cover utilities. So we charged him $100 a month beginning in, because like we said, we were just doing this to help him out. But then once he graduated and we had started we were introduced to bigger pockets, we were already looking for a duplex. We said, we really don't mind you living here. So if you would like to live here, we'll give you 2 months to get yourself get a good job after you graduate, but we will charge you closer to market rent. So we charged him $600 a month at that point.
I mean, that was pretty generous of you to say, look, I understand you're in a hard spot. You're in school, part-time job, $100. I mean, it's an extra $100 for you that you didn't have. And then it really helped him out. I mean, I think that's phenomenal that it's sort of like you guys paying it forward a little bit, helping out a friend. And then I love how the fact that you're like, all right, real life's hitting in. You're going up to $600 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll help you out for a while, but now it's time to start paying. So you started collecting $600 a month. Did you split utilities with him after that, or was it just a flat $600 and you took care of everything?
So it was just a flat $600 starting off. We didn't charge him for utilities on top of that. That included everything. But once his friend moved in, which was only a couple months later, actually, when the friend moved in, it was still, he paid $600, his friend paid $600. But once we moved out and we rented the master bedroom, we had the conversation with them. Like, we know that you guys are only paying $600, but now that we're not living there anymore, utilities will be split between the three of you guys. And so it wasn't until we moved out and we were living in the duplex that we completely had them cover all of the expenses of living in the house as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then what did you charge for rent for that third person that moved in?
So for the third person, we decided to charge just a bit more because it's the master bedroom suite, we called it, because you have the bathroom and it actually had its own entrance as well. So you could pretty much live in that place and not have to go through the rest of the house. And so we were charging $750 for that. And so that's where we started the price for the master bedroom suite.
Okay, so I just want to recap this for a second. Your mortgage was $1,344. You're paying that by yourself. Then you're bringing in $100. So now your housing's down to like $1,244. And then you bump his rent up. So now you're at like $734. And then you rent out the other room. So now you're at $134. I mean, this is awesome. Like, while you're thinking of your housing, it's just like you do what the normal American does. You buy a house. You have, not a huge payment, decent sized payment, included the taxes and insurance. And then it's just like drops to where now you're living in a house. Your tenants are paying all but like $100 some. You have hopefully some appreciation going on over the time period. They're also paying down your principal mortgage for you. I mean, like, that right there is perfect. Even if nothing else happened with the story, that's a really, really cool house hack. And then you decided to buy an FHA and rent the master suite for $750. So now you're actually making money on this. I mean, I just think this is incredible.
Yeah, definitely. We love it too. We didn't realize how great it was until we were actually on the other side of the duplex and we ran the numbers completely and we're just like, wow, I didn't realize that we had gotten to this point.
It just sort of crept up on you where you're like, oh, yeah.
And actually, since then, one of the brothers of one of his best friend, also in college, is his younger brother. He was in a rough situation as well. And so we have an office space that we said, we don't mind renting you this space just until you get your self on your feet. So now that office space is being rented for $200 while he's in school.
What?
So,
so it's 4 people in a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom plus office.
All right. If I'm ever down in your town, you two are buying the drink. So, I mean, you're rolling it.
Welcome. Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Awesome. All right. So before I want to go into this FHA in a minute, but before we do that, I have some questions about how you actually worked with these friends that became tenants. So as they started moving in, did you do any sort of written lease with them, or was it more of just sort of a handshake? You're living, be respectful, just pay the rent.
So because of the friendship situation, and I know that a lot of people would recommend against this, for that house, everything has been verbal, and we've had no issues as of yet, just because we've had that relationship before of trusting each other, and everything's worked out well so far. Anytime there's anything near an issue arising, we're able just to have a conversation of how to move forward. So we've had no issues with having no written lease for that, because we personally know everyone that lives there.
Yep. And then how are you actually collecting rent? You just stop by and pick up a check? Or are they sending you money like PayPal or Venmo? Or how are you sort of managing that side of it?
So we were introduced to the site, which is amazing. It's cozy.co. And in the site, we're able to just set up, they put their bank account in, and we're able to passively just collect rent. We don't have to drive and get it. They don't have to drop it off. They're able to just pay their rent through the site every month.
Late fees automatically included, security deposit, all that great stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing.
All right. As a side note, I think I need to go ask Cozy. If someone from Cozy is listening, you should be a sponsor, because I feel like probably 80% of the people I'm interviewing for this podcast all mention Cozy. I use Cozy myself. It's awesome.
Yeah.
If you're listening and you haven't used Cozy, it's wonderful. As they were saying, and you just set up the account for your property. Your tenants get a tenant portal. They can go online and pay however they want via ACH or via credit card or debit card. And then the great thing is it's free for us as landlords. And I mean, It's one thing to collect rent, but then how it doesn't cost you anything. I mean, you can't get any better than that.
Yeah, it is awesome.
Yeah, we love it.
All right. So you sort of progress through renting one room, renting two rooms, moving out, renting all the rooms, now renting the den and having this awesome cash flow property. What made you decide to actually look for another property and do like what's considered maybe a true house hack of like buying a small multifamily property?
So I could say honestly, every bit of that credit goes to Brandon Turner with Bigger Pockets.
Oh yeah.
Listening to his house hacking story was just like, if I was already motivated to retire by 40, he exaggerated that feeling by like 1,000 after listening to his house hacking story. And so after listening to his story, reading a few of his books, we started looking for any type of multifamily, a residential multifamily, so 2 to 4 units, and looking at the Orlando area. Unfortunately, there didn't seem to be many options, but we happened to fall across one that needed a bit of repair on both sides, but turned out to be pretty good after we ran the numbers also, which we were taught to do by Bigger Pockets.
Yes.
And so we put the numbers in the Bigger Pockets calculator. Everything looked good and it looked like it would be a good investment, so we moved forward on it.
Well, just in case anyone's listening and you've never heard of Bigger Pockets, I'm going to put it in the show notes. You can just Google them. I'll also do a link to one of the first articles Brandon put up about how he did a house hack, and also a link to their calculator. I love Bigger Pockets. It's a great resource. They also have a fantastic podcast that's about a huge variety of real estate. So definitely check that out. It'll be in the show notes. All right. So you sort of realized, you want to retire at 40. Now, all of a sudden you realize house hacking and real estate can really help me get there and accelerate that path. You started looking for sort of a small multifamily. How long did you actually spend looking before you found this property?
So we started
in about March.
Yeah, around March of 2018 is when we first started looking, and we closed on the house in September of 2018.
Yeah, so about 6.
Yeah, 6 months. I mean, one of the things a lot of people say is sometimes I think people, and I think I even do it too, is at different times we make up excuses. Well, we can't house hack because I'm married, or can't house hack because I have kids, or can't house hack because now the market's different. I mean, you found a multifamily in 2018 is very different than finding a multifamily in 2010, 2011, 2012. It took you 6 months, but it sounds like you were persistent and you actually got it and found it. So let's dig into some of those numbers. I know you mentioned it need a little bit of work and you did an FHA loan. What was actually the purchase price on it? And then did you do an FHA or the FHA, 203K?
So the purchase price was $280,000, and it was an FHA loan. So we put down 3.5%, which was $9,800 is how much we put down. And our lender was able to roll in I think it's called the MIP, the 1% origination fee into the loan. So our complete loan ended up being $274,000 after the closing cost was rolled into loan. And out of pocket, so with the $9,800 of the actual principal that we put down and closing costs that we actually had to pay out of pocket, we paid a little under $20,000.
Yeah, so not bad at all. And how was the duplex made up? How many bedrooms and bathrooms were on each side?
So it was 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom on each side.
Okay, and then do you remember when you bought it, what was your mortgage payment roughly?
So our mortgage payment was $1,345 was the principal and interest, and we also had an escrow account on that. So our complete payment was $1,825.
All right, $1,825. So again, this is starting to get a little bit on the high side, but not bad considering you're buying a duplex and you've got the other side of it as a rental. Plus, you've got this cash flow coming in from your very first original single family that you bought. Now, you mentioned it needed some work. What type of work did it actually need, and what was the process of doing the work? Did you live in it while you were working on it? And just talk us through that a little bit.
So you can go ahead.
Well, he mentioned it needed a little work. It was the property was built in 1984, and so they probably only updated it once since then. So it was livable. It wasn't a condition that was unlivable, but it just definitely needed some cosmetic work in order for us to get optimal rent. And so we put one side was already rented, and so the side that was rented, we acquired tenants on. It was $1,345 that they were paying for rent, and so on that side we didn't put any work into it until they moved out. And the side that we were living on, which I know you're going to ask this question later, so I'll wait to to say that in the future. But on the other side of it, we got new appliance in there, and we renovated. We put granite countertops in, and got new countertops and everything like that. And the renovation costed us about $13,500 on that.
Well, that's not bad to sort of fix it up with the way you're describing it. All right, so I mean, even though you close on this property, your mortgage all in is a little over $1,800, and you had an existing tenant a little over $1,300. So, I mean, even if you didn't have the cash flow from the other property, you're buying a duplex, and your housing cost would have only been $500 a month or so. I mean, that's a pretty good deal right there.
Yeah.
Yes, and also to clarify that the difference between the single family home and this duplex property is that this is actually inside of Orlando. So actually right down the street from the University of Central Florida, one of the biggest colleges in Florida. And so it's in the city. Yeah. Apopka, where the single family home is on the outskirts where you can drive down the street and see cows. We were actually in the city of Orlando with the duplex.
So even better location and still only $500. Okay, that's pretty awesome. All right, so you did a little bit of work. Did the amount of work that the property need either, scare either of you off, or were either of you hesitant about it needs work, or was it sort of like, hey, this is great, we can add value, sort of make it our own? I mean, what were you two thinking? Were you both on board with a property that needed work?
Well, we were, let me put it like this. We're always skeptical to spend money when we're not 100% sure of what the outcome will be. And this was our first renovation of any property because our first single family home was a brand new home just built. And so we didn't have to do any type of renovations or anything like that. The house was perfect when we moved in. And so we definitely had some reservations on some of the decisions that were made between saying, oh, if we get this type of countertop versus another type of countertop, will it actually give us the difference in rent and things like that? But all in all, after the renovations were done, we were pretty happy. It wasn't the renovations that that bothered us. After the first day that we moved in, we discovered that we had a huge septic tank issue. So
fun.
It turned out that both the neither one of the septic tanks had been popped. pumped for either side of the duplexes for years. And we also needed to replace the drainage field on both sides as well, per the quote that we got from the guy that came out to inspect it. And so the first day there, the plumbing backed up, and yeah, it was a interesting first day investment experience.
Oh man,
we were very happy that it happened to us though, and not our tenants.
Right.
Yeah. We didn't have to do any damage control. We just had to be uncomfortable in ourselves.
Well, when you bought it, did you have a home warranty to help cover that? Or did you sort of say, no, we don't need a home warranty because it's going to be an investment property and, we're fine covering any, expenses that might come up?
So no specific home warranty that would have covered these issues that occurred. We did go through having an inspection done, but learning experience for anyone that's listening, we kind of rushed through the inspection period. The thing that had happened is that the tenant side of the duplex had utilities on and everything since they have been living there.
Yeah.
But the part that wasn't occupied didn't have utilities on. And when the guy initially came to inspect, he realized this, and we tried to call to get the utilities turned on the unoccupied side. We were told they were turned on, sent the guy back out, and he said they're still not on. And so after some advice that we had taken from other people, we were just like, yeah, just go ahead, go through and inspect what you can, because we've been told that everything should be okay. And we really wish we could have done that.
And it's all in learning.
Yeah.
We take it all, with a grain of salt, because we're happy that we learned from this mistake on something that was not as pricey as it could have been.
Right, because it's not the $1 million property.
Right,
so.
Right. And so we did end up having to fork out $3,500 to replace one of the drainage fills. The other drainage fill, they said it could last about another 2 years. So we're waiting until we get a little bit more cash flow from the property before we replace the other one.
Okay.
And one more thing that came up was that because the utilities weren't on, we didn't realize that we didn't have any hot water at all. So there was a tankless hot water heater on the wall that we just assumed worked. We moved in, turned on the hot water for the shower, waited 10 minutes, and no hot water.
Nothing. Yeah.
And our luck, it was in Orlando, Florida. We don't really have cold days, but just our luck, that was the coldest day of the year, and we didn't have hot water.
Sounds like a typical landlord story. What can go wrong will go wrong. Oh my goodness. Well, clearly you're laughing about it now.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I mean, I think that's a really great tip that you mentioned. If you're ever going to do an inspection on a property, make sure the utilities are on. I mean, if they're not, an inspector can go through and still check a lot, but you can't check the big two systems in there, the electrical and the plumbing. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great lesson learned. I mean, thank you for sharing that, because, I mean, I think the best way we learn is by learning from other people's successes and their failures. And I think sometimes we don't share those failures for multiple reasons, but I think the more that we actually share them and we all make them, it just helps everyone move along a lot better. One thing you did mention is, sort of as you were looking and before you were closing, you had some of this sort of reservation. I know a lot of people have this like fear of, over analyzing a property, or they realize, just the fear stops them. I mean, how'd you actually move past that? And how did the two of you say, like, okay, yes, we're nervous. We know it's not 100% sure thing. We think we're doing the right thing. But, like, what you got you over that hump of actually closing on the property?
So I think I'll go first on that. I'm the type of person, yes, I overanalyze, and I always try to look at the worst case scenario. And so the thing that made me comfortable in moving forward was looking at the worst case scenario and asking myself, could we survive this in the case of the worst case scenario? And so after evaluating that, like imagining that we moved in, the tenant moved out on the other side, and we had to pay for the entire duplex ourselves and had to renovate things before we can get a new tenant in. We ran the numbers, and with our jobs, we may have to live on some tight budgets, but we could have survived that turnaround. So that's what made me comfortable with moving forward, knowing that in the worst case scenario, we can still survive.
You're good. It wouldn't be the best, most comfortable life, but you'd be good. Okay. What about with you?
And I agree with what John said. But I think another thing, just to add on to what he said, is that this is the time that we need to take risks, because we are and the youngest we'll ever be. And so if we're going to make a mistake, we should make it now so that we have time to recover. And so that's what kind of let me push forward as well, is that we know we want to get into real estate, and we know that this is probably the best way to do it. And so we need to just start. And this looks, all of the different duplexes that we looked at, this looked like the best deal. So we've done our research, we've done everything that we can do on our part. And yes, there are some things that could go wrong, and they did go wrong, but we survived it. And now we have our foot in the game. We're building equity on a property, and we're able to start saving for our next one. So
that's awesome.
I'm happy that we did it.
I love the attitude that you have of, let's take the risks now, because this is the perfect time when we're young. And, not that you can't take risks when you're in your 40s or 50s or 60s, but doing it when you're younger and there isn't as much downside, it's so much easier. And I love the attitude that you had. All right, so you closed on the property. You had some fun issues pop up. You did the work on your side. How long did it actually take you to do that cosmetic work on your side?
About 6 weeks.
Yes.
Okay, great. So 6 weeks, you moved in. The tenant that was existing on the other side, did you have them sign a lease, or was it still sort of handshake at that time? How'd you approach that?
So the tenant that we acquired was already under a lease. He had just signed into a new lease so it was May that he started the new lease, and we bought the property in the middle of September. So we acquired the lease that he was already under. Okay, great.
And after that sort of year was up, did the tenant renew? Did you go out and find a new tenant?
So no, after the lease was up, he didn't renew. So we ended up having to renovate the other side a little faster than we would have liked to. And another little tip that we learned from this experience as well is that the inspector did inspections on both sides, but we didn't actually go into the other side of the property. So we never actually physically saw what the other side of the property looked like. And so once they moved out, we were like, wow, this is worse than the other side looked.
That is an important tip, is to walk. You don't have to be under contract before you walk the other side. A lot of times I'll make an offer on a property as is, get it under contract, and then walk through the occupied units. But I think that's a great point that you mentioned, is walk through it, even if there's tenants in there, so you understand it, and you don't have that, oh my goodness, after they leave.
And that's something I just have to admit was kind of like I don't know if fear is the right word to say, but I didn't want to invade on their private space. So I was just like, I'm not sure if I feel right walking through their house, even though we're thinking about buying it, because this is their place and stuff like that. If we don't buy it, they just feel like people are coming through. Yeah. But it wasn't until after that I learned that it's pretty common that once a purchase or a contract is being thought of, that tenants there are okay with people coming through and looking at what they're projecting to buy. So
yeah, I think the biggest reason why he felt that way is because when we were looking at the property, one of the tenants were there. They were outside, and our realtor asked if we could see the place, and they told us no. So after that, we kind of were just like, okay, I guess, if they did an inspection, it looks fine. We saw pictures on the inspection. I guess, everything is okay. Yeah. But it was definitely in worse shape than we expected it to be.
Another tip, which also made us feel falsely comfortable with not looking at the other side. We trusted the pictures that were on Zillow, and we're like, no, that place actually looks better than the side we're moving into. Oh, that's going to be great.
Oh, man. You got duped by the pictures. Oh.
Yes.
So always trust but verify the pictures that you see on Zillow and Trulia and sites like that, because that may not also always be the case, because the pictures that we saw had different flooring and everything.
Oh my goodness.
And so yeah.
I wonder if the owner just took old pictures and be like, this is what it would look like before the tenant moved in, and then all got changed around.
I think that's what the case was.
So one tip, if anyone is listening that's a landlord, what I've done when I've sold places with tenants, once it's getting ready to go on the market, I give them a heads up. I say, look, I'm getting ready to sell the property. I've enjoyed you as tenants. There's going to be a couple inconveniences. In advance, I'll actually give them a gift card. And I'll say, look, here's a gift card for the inconvenience. And then after it closes, I send them another little gift card or buy them a bottle of wine or just something I know that they'd appreciate. It's only costing me like $25 or $50, but I found when you do it up front and then after the sale, the tenants really appreciate it. And that way you don't have the tenants that are out there like, nope, you can't go into my unit, and it messes up the process of the sale.
Right, yeah.
All right, so you had to quickly renovate the other side. It was more work than you thought it was. You know, what'd you end up having to spend on that side for renovations?
So the other side, we spend a little under $19,000 for renovation on that side.
Oh yeah, so quite a bit more than the 13 you spent on your side.
Right.
Now once you got the work done, what'd you actually get for rent on it?
$1,400. We put it up for rent for $1,350, and then the tenants that we actually did acquire, they had a pet, so our pet rental fee was $50, and so it ended up being $1,400 total a month.
Okay, so $1,400 a month. And how did you actually find the tenants? Where'd you advertise the unit for rent?
So Turbo Tenant, we posted the information there, and Turbo Tenant sent it out to a lot of other advertisement places like Trulia, I think Zillow, quite a few places. And then outside of Turbo Tenant, we posted it on a few other places. You can post on Cozy as well, and they do something similar. But the majority of and the big one, a huge one, was actually Facebook. We were surprised at how many people responded from Facebook Marketplace looking for a place to rent.
Yeah.
And so between Turbo Tenant and Facebook, those were the ones where we got the most prospective tenants.
And I actually think that our Facebook is where we actually got the tenant from that actually signed on. But Turbo Tenant was good for managing applications. That's where we put in, even if we got inquiries through Facebook, we would put it in on Turbo Tenant, and that's a way that we were able to organize and know which ones we verified already. And they actually have a section where they can actually send an email to verify, get landlord references and everything like that. So it was very, very easy to use.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I haven't heard of Turbo Tenant, so I'm going to check it out. I'll also put it in the show notes for folks to go back. All right, so you're getting $1,400. You know, that's, leaving you about $400 and some change to cover the mortgage. And so what'd you do on your side? 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom. It's renovated. Did you end up getting a roommate? Was it just the two of you? I mean, how'd you do that situation?
So a few months after we got the new tenant, well, it may have only been a 1 month after we got a new tenant, my father-in-law, her father had recently retired from school, from teaching elementary school, right? And decided that he was going to go to Costa Rica to learn how to speak Spanish. And so with that, my mother-in-law, her mom, would have been in the house that she lives in by herself. And so we were like, okay, so we could use this as an opportunity not only to help her with things around the house, making sure bills and things like that are good, but also as an opportunity for ourselves to stack and collect money to get our next property. So we decided a month after we got the tenant for the other side to move into my in-laws' house and rent out the side of the property we were living on at the duplex. Cool. And that's where we are now. And
what'd you end up finding a tenant for on that other side, and what are you getting in rent?
So we posted that one, the other side. We posted the rental for $1,275. I'm laughing because I wanted to post it for a little higher. He wanted to price it at $1,250 because it wasn't, the upgrades in our side wasn't as, we kind of went all out, and the other side, which I think we probably over renovated the other side of the property just a little bit. And so this side wasn't as over renovated, but it still had granite countertops. It had new cabinets. It looked very nice. And so we came to a compromise. He wanted $1,250, I wanted $1,300, so we came to a compromise of $1,275. And so we put it on the renter on Turbo Tenant for $1,275, and the tenants that we acquired, they actually had 2 pets, and so with the pet rental, we were up to $1,375. And at first we were kind of we've heard a lot of advice that you don't really want to have a lot of or you have to decide whether or not you are ready for the responsibility of having tenants with pets. But we realized the property that we had our property has a big backyard, and it has a patio, and it's actually very conducive for pets. And so we had to make that decision between ourselves. Are we ready for the responsibility that it takes, that, having tenants that have pets, it's a possibility that they could be more damaged and all of that. So what we decided was that we would just take the risk, get the additional pet rental, and then just have them do a little additional security deposit for their pets.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a hot debate online of some people are very much, no, I will never let pets in my rental units, and then other folks are. And, I just keep watching the trends, especially with younger folks, this sort of millennial generation where, they delay have kids, and then they have fur babies, and they put so much money into their pets. And you're sort of, if you don't do pets, you're cutting off this huge chunk of the market. So I still have that same debate where some I do and some I don't. But yeah, I think it was a great thing. But, one thing I'm going to touch on is you both had different ideas of what you should rent it for. How'd you actually decide on that? Did you just say, well, here's what we're getting for the other unit? Or did you do any market research? Were there websites you used to actually figure out what was rent?
We both did market research, and I think we did them in different places. I consider myself the hardcore business person, but that's just the outer shell. She's really the hardcore business.
You're the softie is what you're saying. You're the softie. And she's like, nope, we're getting more rent.
Yeah. So I think after doing our market research, we did research in similar places, similar websites, but it's just that she's a bit more aggressive than I am when it came to that. And so that's why there was that $50 difference. And we just decided to meet in the middle, even though she still thinks we should have just went completely on her end.
I will say, just to defend my case, the tenants that actually live there, they actually said this during the viewing, like, we would actually be willing to pay more. We love this place.
Oh my goodness. Yes. If you're hearing that, your price too low, right? If people are like, my goodness. Or you just happen to get lucky and find that perfect fit where it just met all of their boxes. But I mean, either way, when you added in the pet rental income, you actually got a bit more. So, all in all, I mean, you're obviously in a good situation. You're just under $2,800, and your mortgage in taxes, insurance is just a little over $1,800. So this is like $900 a month in cash flow that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So now here's the real question. What are you doing with the cash flow? Did you go out and buy new cars, a boat, and, annual pass to Disney World? Or you saving some of it, paying down debt? Like how are you actually using the money you're making from your first single family and now this sort of $900 a month you're making in cash flow on this property?
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So we're using this opportunity, definitely not to acquire new debt unless that new debt can make us some additional passive income, but to pay off existing debt. And so we just paid off our car last month. So no more car payment. And we've also been paying down some no interest credit card debt. And that's the first phase of living with the in-laws. And the second phase is to aggressively save and start looking for the next small 2 to 4 unit multifamily to move into. And
just to clarify, the debt that he's referring to, like our car payment, because we don't have to worry about our mortgage payments, we were able to just kind of avalanche that car payment and not pay it and pay it off very fast. And then as far as the debt that our business has with the rental properties, we paid for our renovations. Anything we could put on credit card, we did. So I had a credit card. It's actually one of the hacks that I like to use. I take out credit cards with no interest for 12 to 18 months. And I try to see which one has the most sign-on bonus. And so for this last renovation, we took out a Chase credit card, a Chase business credit card, and all the supplies for the renovation we put on it. And I think we financed about $9,000 of the $18,800. We put about $9,000 of it on the Chase credit card, and we were able to get a $500 bonus just for putting $10,000 on it. So I was able to use that bonus to pay down the renovation, and so the extra income that we have after we pay our mortgage, we're paying that balance down so that it will be paid off before the interest payment or the interest-free deadline comes.
Yeah, I've got a series of articles on sort of travel hacking, credit card hacking, churning, and I think it pairs perfectly with real estate investing. I think there's no better fit because in real estate investing, you constantly have large expenses coming up, and then you just go get the sign-up bonus. My wife and I, we are travel fanatics, and especially when we do the long-haul flights overseas, we always fly business class, and we do it on points that we earn from our real estate investing. So, yeah,
Nice.
I love that you're doing this sort of hacking of like, well, we got to spend this money. Is there a way I can use it for really, really cheap and get extra bonuses, cashback rewards, earn points? So, that's awesome. I mean, if you're sort of thinking back through this house hacking experience that you have, what do you feel like your biggest success was?
I think our biggest success was really getting a property that we were able to get. We did the numbers, and I think this property is a little over 6% ROI now that we put in all the additional renovations into it. When we first bought it, our ROI was 15%, but then with all the renovations, now we're down to 6%, but that doesn't include appreciation. So I think that's our biggest success, is that we're able to get a property that was actually bringing us return on our investment of greater than what we could have easily get in the stock market.
And just to piggyback on what she's saying, I think it's the getting started as well.
Yes.
Because we do a lot of internet education between Audible and YouTube. I feel like that's where the majority of our information comes from. And the house hacking thing, at the time, we didn't know anybody personally that had done it. And so just knowing that we got our foot in the door and got the first deal done makes us more excited to move forward to the next deals that are hopefully more profitable than the initial deal.
Yeah, that's really awesome. All right, so thinking back through that same period, what do you think your biggest challenge was? Or did you have something, if you could go back and do it differently, is there something that you would go back and change?
Oh, definitely. I think because this was our first used home purchase, because like my husband said earlier, our first purchase, it wasn't a lot of stress involved. We didn't really have to, double check the numbers or triple check numbers, because it was a brand new house. And so everything was pretty much in line. We didn't have to work they did an inspection as well, but everything was pretty much, there was no issues because it was a brand new house. Not saying there can't be issues with the brand new houses, because I have heard that as well. But with this house, it being built in 1984, and then not knowing what I was supposed to find on my closing documents, I didn't realize that the security deposit from the lease that I was acquiring was supposed to be on my closing documents. I didn't realize the prorated rent was supposed to be on my closing documents. So when I did the check before we came to the closing table the day before, I didn't know that was missing. And so when we got to the closing table and I asked about that, I said, hey, when do we get our security deposit? We were reassured that we were going to get it. And this is a year later, we never got it.
Still don't have it, yeah.
Right. And so we got legal advice, and we sent a letter to the lawyer sent a letter to request or a demand letter, I guess is what it's called. Yep. No response. And the thing is that we signed everything, that everything was okay. So really we could have taken them to the court for it, but it would have been the amount of money that it costed to sue them for a security deposit. It would have been more money than
not really
just
worth
paying
it.
yourself.
Well,
right.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. I just want to cut in real quick. So
yeah.
You went over it really quick, and just in case anyone missed that. So if you're buying a rental property with existing tenants, there's two big things that are going to happen. One is transfer of the existing security deposit. So say you're buying a 4-unit property and 1 unit's vacant and the other 3 units have tenants in there that all have $1,000 security deposit. That $3,000 in total security deposit should be transferred from the seller to you as the buyer, and it should be listed on that CD or HUD, that closing statement. In addition, just for easy math, say again that same quad that you were looking at, one's vacant, there's 3 tenants in there, they're all paying $1,000 a month. That's $3,000 in gross rents. Now say you close on the 15th, the middle of the month, the seller should give you a credit of prorated rent for half of the month of $1,500. So, on a small deal, it's not a ton of money, but especially as you start looking at bigger properties, that can really make a difference. And especially with cash to close, even on a duplex, if it's $1,000 security deposit and, rents $1,300 and you're closing halfway through the month, this can be an extra $1,000, $2,000 less that you actually have to bring to closing. So that's really important. I'm glad you brought that up, and I just wanted to re-highlight that for folks. So if you are doing your first deal, these are things that you don't really know about unless you hear about it. So that's a great tip. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
And the last thing I just wanted to add on to that, because we went back and forth on trying to understand who was responsible of returning that to the tenant once they moved out. Remember, they moved out at the end of their lease in May. And so at that point, because we took on being landlords and we signed to say that we were responsible for this lease now, had to return that security deposit that we never received from the original owner to the tenants. And so that's just something to keep in mind as well.
So thinking back through those couple things that you would have done differently and the challenges, I think I already know the answer is, but would you do another house hack again?
Oh, no, definitely. Definitely.
That's what I figured what the answer was going to be.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate how open you were. I mean, you had this really cool, double house hack story, getting ready to look on to your next one. But before you go, we like to ask all of our guests a set of final 6 questions that we call the Fast 6.
The famous 6.
Are you ready for them?
We're ready.
Awesome. All right. So number 1, what is your favorite personal finance blog, book, or podcast?
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yep.
Awesome.
I think that, yeah.
Cool. All right. Number 2, what's your favorite real estate related book, blog, or podcast?
Bigger Pockets podcast.
Oh yeah. I mean, I knew that one was coming. All right. So number 3, what's your favorite travel destination that you've been to so far?
Las Vegas, would you say?
Vegas. I would say Vegas.
So what was it about Vegas that drew you in?
I think for me, it was my first time ever playing blackjack and winning money.
Oh, yeah.
So I left there above what I came with. So, and I will say every time I tried playing the game again on cruises or anything like that, I never really won money. So
they got you hooked that first time. They're like, oh, she's a newbie. We're going to make sure she wins so we can get her bag multiple times.
Yeah.
All right. And then what's next on your travel or vacation list? Do you have anything planned coming up?
Cancun.
Planning Cancun soon. Yep.
Oh, yeah. So that's where my wife and I went to Cancun in the Maya Riviera for our honeymoon last year. So,
that's actually where we're going. Yeah.
Oh, cool. If you don't have it, you should look at trying to go out to Chichen Itza, one of the old 7 wonders of the world. It was really, really awesome out there. And then you get to stop at a cenote on the way back, which is this giant hole in the ground with this sort of not quite underground lake, but it's a cool way to spend half a day, 3/4 of a day going out and seeing it, and then stopping and seeing a cenote on the way back.
Nice.
Oh, awesome. We'll definitely check it out. Thank you.
Yep. And then number 5, what is the biggest bucket list item that you haven't accomplished yet?
Going to Tokyo, Japan. That's been at the top of my list for a long time. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Awesome. And then what is it about Tokyo that draws you in?
I don't know. I've just seen movies about it. I've seen videos about it. I know a lot of video games are made there.
I think the technology aspect of it.
Yeah, and the technology too. Just everything about it is just always intrigued me since I was a kid. And I'm a big anime fan as well. So.
Oh, cool. So that'll work well then. What you need to do, though, is as you start looking for this next house hack, make sure to do some credit card sign-up bonuses so that way you get the points so you can fly over there for free.
Yep. That's the plan.
Awesome. All right. So number 6, final question. What is your favorite life hack?
I think we already touched on it already. I think credit cards is that hacking credit cards. We pay all of our bills on credit cards. And so our credit cards actually pay us to use them. So what we do is anything that can be paid with credit card, we pay with credit card. And so, but we pay off our balances at the end of every month. So we never pay interest on them. And we always get our credit card cashback reward. So we have a credit card for eating out. We have credit card for gas. We have a credit card for just miscellaneous things. Yeah. So
awesome. Yeah, I actually have this 7 series article all about travel hacking credit card reward because I do the same thing. And I always have friends that say, well, can you explain this? And I just wanted an easy way to point and be like, go read this first and then come back with questions. So awesome. Yeah. Thank you both so much for being on the show. This was so much fun talking with both of you. I love the attitude that you have, even though you had all these different challenges along the way, and it's a really cool sort of double house hack story. And you got to let me know when you actually get on to your next house hack so we can have you back on to give an update about your first 2 properties, and then we'll get to hear about your new house hack.
Definitely will. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed being here.
Yes, we did.
Thank you for listening to the House Hacking Podcast. For more up-to-date information on house hacking, to access links and resources mentioned in today's show, and connect with a guest and host, head over to www.fibrei.com. That's www.fibrei.com, where your house hacking journey begins.